So welcome to our Roots series, and we're going to talk about a foundational element of the importance of really being aware of what's going on in our inner lives, our inner world. How many of you can think back to 2008? How many can go that far back? Right? There was a movie that came out in 2008 called Vantage Point, and the movie, the premise of the movie is to take the idea of this. There was an assassination, it's fictional, an assassination on the president, and what they did to try to figure out what happened, it's like they would replay all these different scenes leading up to the assassination attempt, and they would do that from the perspective of the different characters in the movie. So they tried to really figure out what happened by going back and replaying, and so, kind of brought you in, and so you're like, no, I think he did it, and then you see other parts, and no, it was probably this person, and so all these different things that led up to this assassination and why it ended up being the person that it was. So it's kind of a really interesting perspective to think about, okay, from these different vantage points, what really happened on that particular day. So it's really an interesting thought. How many of you remember this picture from Facebook just recently, probably within the last, couple of years? Grace is the first picture there. Yeah, there it is. This is a dress. And this became a point of conversation because nobody could figure out what color it really is. And so some people were saying gold. I see blue and black. How many of you see something different? Yeah. Purple, gold. It's really interesting, though. That was the big thing on Facebook, is everybody was seeing something different. And so there's some scientific evidence why that is, but think about just vantage point. Put up that next slide, Grace. What do you see? Right, we did this, Joe. We did this at the parenting conference where we talked about, we put a certain thing up there, and we talked about this importance of perspective and developing cognitive development, the importance of that, and asking our kids, what do we see with certain things? And so, what do you see? Somebody said blue?
No.
Snow?
Chaos.
How many see order?
I said kids ministry.
Kids ministry. We had somebody in the first gathering who said the back seat of their car, and they have two small kids. What else? Kaylin, what do you see? It's a lot of yellow paint. So there's a particular color that sticks out to you. Mike, what do you see? Mike's a teacher. What do you see? Come on, Mike. I get to be the teacher today, so I'm asking you the question. What do you see?
Come on, Mike.
You're not going to answer it? That's an interesting perspective as well, right? Good. What about this one? Anybody watch The Office? Man, you're missing out, Kaylin. There's Dwight Schrute. He's up to no good. That's the day when he catches a waste paper bin on fire and there's smoke and everybody's got to evacuate, and so he's heating up one of the handles, so they check the door, and just the wrong way you want to go about making sure everybody knows their escape routes and what to do in case of a fire. So, depending upon your vantage point, we all see things from a different perspective. We see things a little bit differently. And this is what I love, because in just a minute, we're going to read from Luke chapter 15. And if you've read the story of the prodigal son, then you know that there are these different elements, these different aspects, these different perspectives that come out in the story, depending upon which one you focus on. And in the story, the story has three main characters, and it's the father, and it's the older brother, and it's the younger brother. And depending upon which character you focus on, it kind of brings a different element alive in the story. So each of those play a different role. So as we read, I want you to be aware of this, as we read about the father in the story, this really is a picture of Father God. And so it's important that we get an idea of who he is and what he's like in the story, because it's depicting just the heart of God, his heart for humanity. And then with the two sons, it really brings us this picture of humanity. And so when we read about the Father, I want you to see God. And when you read about the two sons, here's what I want you to do when you think about the two sons. I want you to figure out where you fit. Which son are you? Are you the older brother? Are you the younger brother? Or possibly you could be a combo of both. So as we read, I want you to see the picture of God, and then I want you to see kind of which way do you lean? Do you lean more toward the older brother or the younger brother? All right, so we're going to pick up, and we're going to look at Luke chapter 15 together. And so you'll notice on the screen, we're going to begin in verse 11. So hopefully you brought your Bible or your device, pull that out, and we'll read together starting in verse 11. It says, "Then he, Jesus, said, a certain man had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me.' So the father divided them his livelihood." So he divided to them his livelihood. And I think it's important to catch there too. It was the younger son who asked for his inheritance early, but notice the father, who's still alive, just happens to be in a place where he can divide his livelihood, and it says he gave it to his 2 sons. He gave it to them. So he didn't give it just to the younger son because he asked. It says he gave it to both of them. It says, "And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possessions with prodigal living. But when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in the land, and he began to be in want. Then he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. And when he came to himself, he said," and say that with me, "and when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer to be worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' And he arose and he came to his father, but when he was still a great way off." Now again, get the picture of the father there. It says when the son was still a great way off, remember the son who asked for his inheritance early, wasted it on prodigal living. It says when he was a great distance off, that the father saw him, and he ran to him and greeted him and kissed him, and just was about ready to throw a party here in just a minute. And the son said to him, "Father, I sinned against you, against heaven and in your sight, and am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his servant, "Bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet." Those are all significant things. It speaks of him being restored to complete status as son, not an adopted status, not as one who is a servant in the home. He was given his original place, the status as a son. And it says, but the father said, "Okay, bring out the robe, bring out the best, and bring out the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found," and they began to be merry. Now his older son was in the field. And as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, "Your brother has come, and because he has received him safe and sound, your father has killed the fatted calf." Notice the response of the brother in verse 28. The older brother, "But he was angry and would not go in. Therefore his father came out and pleaded with him. So he answered and said to his father, 'Lo, these many years I have been serving you. I never transgressed your commandment at any time, and yet you never gave me a young goat that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as the son of yours came,'" doesn't even call him his brother here, "'who has devoured your livelihood with harlots, you killed the fatted calf for him.' And he said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that I have is yours. And it was right that we should make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive again, was lost and was found.'" So as we read, where do you see yourself in the story? Though the older brother doesn't see it, both brothers in the story, they both have a problem. Just one is in a place to see it, while the other one is not in that place. And as we talk about this problem today, this problem is nothing new with humanity. It's not a problem that's new to man. In fact, this is a problem that can be traced back to Genesis chapter 3 and the fall in the garden with Adam and Eve. It's a problem that can be traced back generations. And it's a reality that we all deal with, that you deal with and that I deal with. Verse 12 says that the younger son asked for his inheritance early, all right? So we get that. And I don't know about you, but sometimes when I read that initially, it's like that's, doesn't seem like an unrealistic or necessarily unfair question. Maybe a little bit innocent enough. Then obviously we know as he spends it on himself and he wastes his life away, okay, it gives us a little greater insight into what's really going on in him. But in that culture, especially in that context, by asking for his inheritance early, basically he's saying, I want to live independence of my father's influence, of his counsel, of his wisdom. I want to live outside of his goodness, his grace, his provision. He's saying, I want to live as if you are dead. So I'm thinking, if I'm a father and I have the ability to share my inheritance early with my kids and I'm still around, why wouldn't I want to do that with them before I die? So kind of get that on that end, but we know on the other end, though, that there's more at play here, isn't there? Well, the younger brother's problem is a little easier to see. It's right out there in front. There are clues in the story that give us insight into the brokenness of the older brother as well. Verse 28 says that the older brother refused to go into the party. So the younger brother comes, there's a big party, the older brother comes, stumbles upon it, it's like, what's going on? And he refuses to go in. Now, he was angry at his father for throwing a party. And why was he angry? He was angry, first of all, because he thought in his heart, he knew that his brother didn't deserve it. His younger brother just went and wasted, right? So maybe he took his inheritance and he's taking good care of it and he's doing the right thing with it, while his younger brother went and he wasted it. So in his mind, he's thinking, why is my undeserving brother getting a party? So there's that side of his anger. And then the other side of the anger is the side of him concluding in his own mind, while his brother is undeserving, he is deserving. So we have this undeserving and deserving thing playing out in the anger of the older brother. It's like, I deserve a party. I've done right? I'm taking care of the inheritance. I've not transgressed against your commandments. So he was angry for those two reasons. And then even further revealing to me, in my mind, my perspective, is verse 29, when he says this, I've been working like a slave for you. Now, think about if you are a father and you have a relationship with your children, what does that communicate? It communicates that there's not much of a relationship going on. It communicates, his words reveal that there's something going on in the relationship, that there's not much of a relationship here. It reveals that the son really doesn't know the heart of the father. He doesn't know his father's heart. He doesn't get grace. He doesn't understand really what's going on. And so he associated excuse me. The older brother associated right behavior with getting what he wanted. And when he didn't get what he wanted, he got angry. And so I just want to stop there and I want to sit there for a minute and I want to ask you, how is your relationship with God? What happens in your relationship when you don't get the things that you want? What do? How do you respond? And that little test there gives us a little bit of an indication of what kind of relationship we have. Are we in this relationship only to get what we can get out of it? Are we in this relationship only to be noticed? To be somebody? How many know when we don't get the things that we want, when we ask God, it says something a little bit it's a little bit revealing concerning maybe what may be going on in our hearts and how we respond. It says here the older brother didn't get what he wanted, and so he was angry. So think about this. The older brother, like the younger brother, was living independent of the father. It's just playing out in a different way. See, the older brother wanted to call the shots just like the younger brother did. The older brother wanted to make his own rules just like the younger brother did. The older brother wanted to determine what was right and wrong just like the younger brother did. He was deserving. He was self-sufficient. So in terms of brokenness, they're both broken in the same way. One's just a little bit, easier to see. The other one just kind of runs under the radar a little bit more. See, both brothers represent a picture of brokenness. And so the first point I want to bring out today, and this is such a foundational, important thing in terms of our relationship with Christ, our understanding of Him, is that we're all broken. All. All is all. All people are broken, whether you wear it on your sleeves, whether it's visible on your face, visible in your body, visible, in how you carry yourself or not. We all have a problem. We are broken people. And that thread of brokenness, listen, it runs through all of humanity. The best of us, the least of us. That thread of brokenness runs through all of humanity, every generation, every family, every human heart. Romans 5:12, I have it on the screen there. It says, therefore, just as through one man sin entered into the world, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because all sin. And there was this religious reality in the culture of Jesus' day that Jesus really had to kind of pound home that reality that yes, we're all broken people. In the Jewish mindset, Gentiles, non-Jewish people, they were broken. They had problems. Samaritans, they didn't like Samaritans. They knew they had their issues. But for a lot of the religious of their day, they had a hard time seeing their own brokenness. And so Paul, in developing further this theology, develops it further and says, yeah, all have sinned. Romans 3:9, both Jews and Greeks are all under sin. All. Romans 3:10 says, there is no one righteous. No, not one single person. I was thinking about how things changed after 9/11. I had a friend who lived in Oklahoma City, and where the Unabomber, one of the buildings there where the Unabomber, that bomb went off, he said you could just walk right into that building, get in an elevator, and go right to the top. No any kind of security measures. So nothing really changed after that. He went and got in an elevator, went to the top, and could take pictures and do whatever he wanted to. How many know that after 9/11, a lot of that changed? There was a GM, a general manager of Coke bottling here he lived in Gig Harbor, came to our church for a while before he moved to Mississippi, but he invited me to his plant there in Federal Way, and so I went and thought, hey, it'd be cool to check out their bottling. I mean, they bottle just thousands per second or whatever it is of these bottles of Coke, and it's pretty fascinating how the whole system works, and he wanted to show me how his plant is run, and so I showed up there, and there's gates with barbed wire and security, and you got to go into this window, and you got to check in, you got to tell them the purpose for your being there, and Alf runs the whole thing. I'm like, didn't care if I knew Alf or not. If I wasn't, scheduled to be a part of that day, they weren't going to let me in. Got a little visitor's pass, and so I got to walk around. So just think about how one single event changed the game, the rules of the game for everyone. Right? TSA, just all these different things that now we have to do as a result of an act of terror. Think about this. What started with Adam and Eve in Genesis 3 and the fall, it bypasses no one. Adam and Eve were the first in a long line of people to consciously make the choice to live independently of God, to live outside of His provision, His grace. They were the first in a long line of people to say, I want to do it my way. My way is better. I want to live this thing out the way that feels good to me, seems good to me. How many of you have watched Remember the Titans? All right, classic. Some of you maybe don't like athletic movies, but sports movies, but this is great, very inspiring. We watch all the time in our home. But there's one part where Coach Boone comes, and he's the new coach, and it's the first day of the practice, and they're always hard. And you have Blue, who's one of the big defensive linemen, and he's having a hard practice, and he's tired, and he kind of quits during one of the plays or something. I forget what it was exactly, but Coach Boone gets in his face and says, "What's going on, Blue? What are you doing?" He said, "Coach, I'm tired." So Coach Boone gets up and he says, "Hey, everybody, Blue is tired." To make an example of Blue, everybody's going to run. What Blue did kind of set a precedence. Now everybody's going to run because Blue is tired, and so they had to do extra runs and stuff. But just think about that, how it started with Blue, and now everybody had to pay for Blue being tired. That's the reality of sin. What Adam and Eve, and you're like, thanks a lot, Adam and Eve, what they introduced, now we all participate in on some level. And here's the thing with that, and here's what I believe: if it wasn't Adam and Eve, it would have been somebody else. It would have been me. Somebody getting this great idea in their mind that they can live outside of God's provision, live independently of His provision, grace, and love. So the threat of sin and its imprint, it's nothing new to history past and present. Murder, jealousy, rage, vengeance, impatience, lack of love, independence, selfishness, unchecked pursuit of pleasure, lust, hate, neglect, addiction, oppression of the weak and poor and people who are different, an insatiable lust for power, trust in riches, pride in our ability to be our own Savior. How many know I just described the world that we live in? I mean, that's just the reality. Right? We have hopes and dreams for a better world, but that's the reality, that we all participate in this level of brokenness. None of these things are new to humanity. These roots can be traced all the way back again to the story of Adam. The problem of evil, we all contribute. And so sin has always been present and always has consequences and always will, until the day that Jesus says, "Okay, I'm coming again. I'm going to make all things right and new." Until that day, the consequence of sin is brokenness. And here's the reality: we live in a broken world. Right? We turn on the news. We understand that. We look in our own families, marriages. Right? We look in our culture. We get that. There's brokenness everywhere. And as a consequence of that brokenness, everything is harder. Remember in Genesis where there were consequences to the fall, and God said to Adam, you're gonna labor. Your labor is going to be hard. And He told Eve, and your labor and childbearing is going to be just painful. Right? There's this reality that everything is harder. Relationships are harder. Work is harder. Sickness is prevalent. Pain and suffering and sorrow are felt and seen in every corner of the earth. And most of us know tragedy, and most of us, we know tribulation on some level. If we've not experienced ourselves, then we know someone. We're close enough to someone who is currently, presently, dealing with very hard life issues. Fear, angst, addiction, it's all part of the dysfunction of our family. It's in yours and it's in mine. Everything that was good and pleasant and orderly changed because of sin. We have a problem. And there's no escaping what Adam introduced to humanity. Brokenness is unavoidable. I can look outside and I can see it outside. But if I look inside, I can see it inside. It's here. And here's the thing: it's easier to talk about other people's brokenness, but where humanity has a hard time is when we have to talk about our own brokenness and what that means for each and every one of us, and what we do with that brokenness, and where we turn for solutions to that brokenness, how we may try to numb that brokenness with medication or with pleasure or different things. See, this is exactly the place the older brother found himself in. He had no problem seeing the brokenness of his younger brother. Let's just think about it this way, in that sense too. He didn't have any problem seeing that his dad had different ideas about who should be having a party and who shouldn't be having a party. Think about that. how our brokenness translates to in our relationship with our Father, with God. Right? We don't get what we want. Things don't turn out the way we want them to. We have different ideas about what should and shouldn't be happening in our lives. How things should be going easier and better for us. See, he was unwilling to see his own brokenness. Someday you and I, right, we'll stand before God, and we won't stand before him the way we want to be or the way we see ourselves, or want to, I should say, see ourselves. We'll stand before him the way we are. Broken. In verse 17, we're told that it was only after coming to himself that the younger brother, it's only after he came to himself that he decided that he could return home, that he could return to his father. See, this is a picture of humanity. It's a picture of you and me. Only when we have a revelation of God's love, only when we come to this understanding of who we are and our own brokenness, only when we ourselves come to our right minds where we can see ourselves a little more clearly, will we be in a position or a place to be able to receive the grace of God for our lives. Only then will you and I find ourselves in this place where that relationship, that good, amazing relationship that God designed for us in the beginning, for that relationship to be replaced. Or I should say that relationship, only in that place will that relationship be restored. Like the younger brother, I have to realize, you and I have to both realize, we all have to realize that I am the problem. I am broken. I have sinned. My sin and brokenness contribute to the dysfunction. My sin distorts and blurs my ability to see God. It's my sin. My sin obstructs my ability to see the image of God in others. And often we're critical and judgmental of others. Why? Because we have a hard time seeing our own brokenness. I fall short of God's love and his intentions for my life. I miss the mark. I am guilty of living independently of God. I have hurt others. I have had impure thoughts. I have withheld love. Each of us have. And here's the thing, here's the reality. It doesn't take any courage to look out and see the brokenness in other people. It's easy to point out the sin in others. It's easy to see the brokenness in others. It's easy to see the speck, as Jesus said. It's like we see a speck in other people's eyes, but we're unwilling to see the plank in our own eyes. But what about the plank in our own eyes? This reminds me of the woman who sat at the feet of Jesus and began to wipe his dirty feet with her tears and her hair. Now, first, she was in a place that was only reserved for men. The disciples, they didn't like that. And not only that, here was what they thought in their minds, and Jesus caught on to what they were thinking, reasoning. That was like, if you only knew what kind of woman was in front of you. And that's exactly the point. Jesus knew exactly what kind of person was in front of him. A person who understood their brokenness, because here she was, and she was pouring out of her brokenness. She began to weep, and she began to wipe his feet. She began to express this deep intimacy, this deep expression of love. And it was there that Jesus went on and began to share a story to bring this together, to prove a point. He said, let's say a debtor wanted to collect his debts, or wanted to forgive those who had a debt against him, and one was 500 and one was 50. And what if he forgave both of them? Who would be forgiven of, or who would be forgiven of more? Who would get love and forgiveness, I should say? It would be the person who was forgiven of more. Right? The debt of 500 denarii in Luke chapter 7. It would be that person. The point being that here was this woman sitting at his feet, and she was expressing incredible love and devotion. And Jesus went on to say she was doing that because she got it. Great love is often the result of great forgiveness. It's understanding our brokenness. And if you and I have a love disconnect with others, often it can be traced back to that we just don't get our own brokenness. Jesus went on to say that woman was forgiven of much, therefore she loved much. Coming to grips with our own brokenness prepares the way for grace and transformation to enter into our lives. It prepares us, it prepares the ground for a solution. And here's the reality is, as the older brother found out and as the younger brother found out, the solution is not found in their answers, in their own abilities, in their self-righteousness, in their ability to do everything right, or in their ability to express themselves however they want to express themselves. And that's where the good news of the gospel comes in, and that's where that brokenness introduces us to grace, and grace is so irresistible and so amazing because it cannot be earned, and it's never deserved, but it's freely given. And we're going to talk about that here in a couple weeks, because next week I have an announcement to make, and yes, no, we're not having another kid, and no big announcement like I'm going to pastor another church in Gig Harbor or anything like that. But we do have a big announcement, so you don't want to miss next Sunday. But the following Sunday, we're going to talk about the solution. So, from a Christian perspective, talk about roots. Foundational to our relationship with God is understanding our brokenness. And I want to ask you that question: are you aware of your own brokenness?